Hello, I'm Amrit. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Hyper Exponential, and I'm your host. Welcome to the Underwriting Intelligence Podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Kevin Hicks, AI Transformation and Service Delivery Exec at Capgemini. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here. Good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise, super excited to talk to you today. So let's jump right in. I remember talking to you really early on in the kind of Gen AI revolution, when you became the generative AI guy at AIG. And I remember, yeah, I really remember a distinctive conversation about overcoming skepticism early on. We were talking specifically about a rollout of a large foundation model tool and us just kind of talking about how people were like, well, what's the point of this? It's thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. And we were saying like it's $20 per user. It doesn't have to do very much per month to be super useful, right? And now I see really clearly that, the skepticism is being overcome and the momentum behind Gen AI is obviously taken off. But how do you still frame that opportunity to leaders today, particularly when you're presenting some of these tools and the opportunity? Because everything in enterprise is about opportunity cost and prioritization. So how do you frame that opportunity today?
So it has become a lot easier over the last, I'd say, year to 18 months. Going back three or four plus years, you're still trying to get the foundations in. You want to make sure from a risk standpoint, everything is kind of managed and understood. I think now the momentum has shifted and there's more of an embracing of it. And I think the framing is to focus on kind of, let's say, three areas. There's the personal productivity area. There's the workflow kind of integration, workflow acceleration, I think is a really big part from an unlock standpoint. And then lastly, I'd say the business model innovation. So, anything you can do like from a pricing standpoint, um, I think is a needle mover. So I think that the framing then is about how do you prioritize across all of the different opportunities. I think that there's a smaller level of immediate opportunities that AI can help with from a personal productivity standpoint, and that can be unlocked kind of immediately. The larger opportunities, I think, are either one on the business model innovation. I think more data science type work. The workflow acceleration, I think, is going to be the one of the biggest unlocks from how the speed at which business gets done, the quality that it's there kind of from the onset. I think is going to be the real game changer. So I think I'm seeing a lot of more focus right now on the personal productivity and the
Yeah.
workflow acceleration side. There's definitely data science work going on to do some of the more in-depth kind of research and looking at opportunities.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think, this workflow optimization challenge has been around for years, right? I think since as long as I've known you, we've been talking about some of this. How are you seeing the open-mindedness to some of the people you're working with to adapting their workflows now? Because, with these tools have superpowers, but it's still, as you said, a business model transformation challenge. It's still a hearts and mind challenge. How are you seeing the mindsets kind of shift over time?
I think people are concerned about they have FOMO, right? The fear of missing out.
Yeah.
I think almost every facet. When legal and audit want to use the tool finally in their own space, that you've reached a threshold of kind of change. So I think that there's an acknowledgement that yes, we need to understand this and that we need to apply it uh, kind of across the board. I think the transformation piece is a little more challenging because I think you have the thoughts around, okay, how does this change kind of my workforce and kind of how do we recalibrate based on these kind of the importance of cycle time and getting through cycles much faster. It requires kind of some work being done where you move from like a command and control implementation or the management philosophy to that is embedded and you kind of create a gold path that kind of removes the friction and has a smaller group of people that are responsible and accountable and empowered to make decisions quickly. I think that's going to be kind of the huge unlock. However, I think companies are still slow to make those big changes from a resource calibration standpoint, but I think we're starting to see some of that this year. I think we'll see it much more heavily in 27 and 28.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I always think one of the really interesting things about working in a technology company, running a technology myself, is exactly as you said, like, that there are some aggressive changes being made in some spaces, and that tends to happen in technology before it trickles through to the rest of the industry, right? And I think if you look at some of the changes being made in workforce reshaping, the way organizations are changing their layering, how people are managing more widely than ever, that point of like optimizing to cycle time, I think is going to really permeate the industry. I think it's a really good foresight you've got there. You're a technologist, right? And this concept of cycle time is like a really important thing in technology projects. It's like, how quickly can you get a response from delivering something? And it's going to be really powerful to see that kind of move through into insurance as well.
I think so, and I think it's cycle time is one thing, but without quality, it means nothing. So it's the combination of speed and quality. Uh, AI really can be the silver bullet of it's better, faster, and it's not as cheap as it used to be. It's getting more expensive, but it pays for itself, I think, really quickly in most of the use cases.
I totally agree. That's a really nice segue onto the next question I had for you. I say this as a CEO that's found his token consumption 10x in the last 3 months. I was like, whoa, we spent a lot more money on tokens than I ever expected. I'm really interested, because as you said, the costs of these tools now are really getting a lot higher than they've ever been. And I think what you said is really prescient, right? Because consumption has gone up, but that's because actually the benefits, the usage, the impact is higher than ever. People don't spend time on things that they don't find useful, right? So people are actually getting more and more. But the reality of that is that you're still in the situation where you got to get a CEO, CFO on board, right? And again, it's a bit different for me because I'm about as kind of AI aggressive as it's humanly possible to get, right? I think I'm on the token leaderboard myself inside HX, but there are going to be lots of CEOs who aren't quite true believers in all of this technology. So how do you think about framing that benefit analysis and getting the team on board, the leadership team on board?
I mean, I think it's a great question, and I don't think that there's an exact science to it. I talked to some clients, and they want to know about, well, what is my token usage going to be if I do these three things? And I don't think it's that level of precision. I think you look at it from kind of I think higher levels of kind of controlled spend, understanding these are multiple investments across individuals, across teams. Uh, I think when you do that, uh, I think that the goal would be to start segmenting your workflows and looking at as token costs go up, energy consumption goes up, uh, chip chips become more in demand than they are now. I think that's when you'll see the price go up, and I think that's when you need to look at what is the work that we're doing that really requires these nice large language models that are kind of say best in class, but third class, let's say, that can run locally on your own infrastructure or on the edge. I think is going to be a huge pivot because everyone wants to get to where they're just paying for the electricity, right? For the power and these other layers. So I think you have to balance uh, what you're trying to do with the right model, with the right kind of compute infrastructure setup. And I think that you'll start to see a big shift for that, I think, in more in 2027, because I think in 2026, still saying the implementation of kind of this foundational layer, right?
Yes.
The gent embedding it into the ecosystem of the carrier. I think that takes time, and I think that that's where I would say most most large carriers are kind of still in that phase, either
Yes,
starting it, exiting it.
totally agree. Yeah. It's such a good point. There's so many insights in what you said there. Something that you said that stuck out for me is something I've been talking to our clients about, which is this concept of workflow segmentation. When you've got these agents that are so capable, actually giving them jobs, right? Cutting up the workflows and thinking about where agents can be involved is going to be such a big transformation. We're already doing that at HX, working out which workflows can be done completely agentically end to end. And, it's kind of incredible to see what's possible for agents to do completely autonomously now, right? Without any humans in the loop. Um, something you said there about the different models as well, I think is really resonant. I was reading something recently about someone who downloaded one of the open source models on his MacBook and went on the plane and did all his coding completely offline in airplane mode, running the model locally. Right, which is just incredible, right? You think about that's just local on your computer, and exactly as you say, as long as BA or United are paying for the power in your socket, you got the thing running, right?
Right.
Um, which is just amazing. Do you, what do you think the kind of approach from companies is going to be to these open models versus the big ones? But, we've been talking about Anthropic and OpenAI in the press for the last few years, but there's this kind of like big wave of open source models coming through as well.
Sure. And I think that will become, I think, more more prevalent as you get into segmenting the workflows, and
Yeah.
what are you really paying for the kind of this best in class. If it's insurance, apart from pricing and things like that, a lot of it is just rinse and repeat IT, that you don't necessarily need all that. And the other part is, I kind of differentiate. There's uh, these one-time things that you do with AI, and then there's kind of the self-healing and the evergreen environment that you're creating longer term. Uh, yeah, I think on the build side, or really getting rid of the legacy portfolio, just like we worked together, and HX are retiring legacy ring, right, onto the HX platform, and once you get through all those legacy raiders and they're on the platform, now the friction that you had with just the risk that you had of having them in Excel models, the overhead and the key resource dependencies that you had, you're kind of past that. The same applies for all IT, all applications. When you run through that brownfield portfolio, I think really opportunity to, and this wouldn't have been possible prior to AI. I would have told someone they were flat crazy. Uh, think that you could get rid of the brownfield portfolio. I mean, it's this giant ball and chain that, companies dragging around, and the AI, I really look at the next 5 years addressing that brownfield portfolio and get to what I would call like an evergreen portfolio.
I love that. I love that. I remember talking to you about the notion that you'd be able to have an AI agent look at all the raters in your portfolio at any given time and assess it for its appropriateness for current legislation. And I remember joking with you that that wasn't even a problem that would be 30, 50, 100% more expensive or possible. It was just impossible in the past, right? You wouldn't have even tried to try and do that on 1,000 raters with all of the different legislation in the world. Where it's like this really interesting point you make that things have gone from like, the brownfield, which you were like, what, is it even worth it? To now it being possible, right? It's just such a fascinating, like, it's something going from, we didn't even think about it before. And it actually speaks to some of the fact that AI is actually creating new opportunities as much as it's eliminating old ones, right?
It is, and I think that the other things that's lost on people when it comes to kind of like the return on the investment is, is that you had all these rules before, all this command and control, this manual review. I mean, at least in my experience, 30 years in IT, what you say you want to do and what you actually did, they don't always reconcile. And so that means that the actual quality, and your intent, so the implementation of your intent faster with higher quality, it it just changes every kind of facet of IT, but actually how you mobilize resources to take advantage of opportunities that might be very time sensitive. Think about something like the release of Mythos and the stir that created. Uh, Creates an opportunity because everyone is concerned about protecting the firm, and you need to have a strategy for dealing with that. So if you are working with partners or you have a great internal team that can say, this is how we're going to address it with AI, kind of across our portfolio, we'll be able to do it at speed. Those flywheels that you can create with AI, I think is amazing. And that's where I see kind of a big unlock coming in the next, I'd say, couple years.
Yeah, wonderful. That's a nice segue, I think, into actually how we get these things into embedded in organizations. You've had to do this at some of the biggest scale, full stop, in insurance, right? What tips would you have for people trying to approach embedding these tools in large, complex organizations? Because, the trade-off, even with the impact of AI, is the opportunity cost of people's time. People don't want to slow down their day-to-day job. We've worked together with great success. You've been a huge champion to us doing this at scale. But what would you share the experience you've had of like making that a bit more of a win-win rather than I've got to sacrifice something before I get the benefits?
Yeah, I think the first thing, and I came to this conclusion, I would say at the end of last year, is that there's a misconception, and I think that this is kind of a hangover from all of the experience of doing big IT projects prior to AI. So there's this reluctance to, like, I don't have time to do that. I have to focus on this. The reality is it's a capacity creator, not in 2 years, not in a year. It's a capacity creator in 6 days, 6 weeks, very, very quickly. It's a capacity creator. But the burden of proof had been like a boulder on anyone trying to implement AI at an insurance company. Uh, and now it's shifted. It's not completely gone because the burden of proof, uh, you still have to convince the people that they need to adopt it. But I think that there needs to be both a top down strategy, the expectation of using it, and then a bottoms up strategy from fear of missing out and kind of peer pressure in a good way. I think kind of having these AI champions and kind of having this network. It's almost like crowdsourcing or open source, kind of the maturation of your agent workforce. It's not the AI team's responsibility. It's everyone's responsibility. It takes a village. So I think with that mindset and having incentives tied to that and kind of the contributions, I think that you'll see a lot more. I think you'll see a lot more adoption. I think the other thing is you have so much telemetry that's never been accessed, synthesized, kind of like management information that, wow, that I didn't even know that was possible before. I was operating off of like 3 or 4 door metrics. Uh, Now I have like 50 metrics that look at individuals, that look at teams, that look
Yeah.
at visions. So there's also the motivator of, let me show you what you look like. You were talking earlier about the the camera and the detail,
Yes.
right? It's the same thing. The cameras are so
I
much
love
better
that.
now. That could be a
Uh,
blessing or a curse for someone at my age. It's a curse, but
likewise.
it's just a reality that you accept that, okay, this is the new normal. The information is there, and everything's an algorithm to a certain extent. So I think the motivation piece, getting buy-in from everyone. I think society and just kind of you can't go anywhere without talking about AI, and people use it on a personal level, and they see the advantage, and then it's a problem solver, and people have problems, especially at work, and so they selfishly want to solve their own problems so they don't have to deal with the annoyances of kind of the toil of doing work. So I think that still people need to, as they start to see what it can do when it really gets embedded and it's kind of ambient and kind of with you and kind of to kind of uh, know you on a level of how you interact that you didn't think was possible, and it's going to be a great extension. I usually say, just imagine everyone had Iron Man suits. What would you
I
do?
love this
But you,
analogy. Yeah.
that I haven't even thought about it, but you could, you could change the world.
I love that. I love your framing of both the combination of top down and bottom up. I think that's so important. We've seen, and there's lots of case studies out there of just needing a little bit of activation from from the top down, right? People modeling the good behaviors, people setting expectations, but actually the real change coming from that open source, that cross team sharing side of things. I think that's a really powerful framing because I think too many people see it as either or, and the best results really clearly come from both, right? And I think that's just like a really powerful takeaway for anyone thinking about it today. um, I don't know if you found, in your engagements with people, just how much, uh, um, you're seeing leaders start to really grasp the nettle and get involved. Because something you said a second ago really resonated with me. This is one of the first technologies I feel where ChatGPT did this incredible job of evangelizing, right? The making it real for anyone, right? Everyone's using ChatGPT, whether you're a CEO or you're a graduate. It's not like the cloud revolution or Bitcoin or any of these things, which, like, if you talk to a CEO, they didn't really care about cloud technology, right? They knew they needed it. They knew it was like capex opex thing. They knew it was the future, but it wasn't real to them. Are you seeing a little bit more kind of fluency with the tools at the top table when you're talking about big strategic initiatives now, or is it taking time?
I think it's still taking. I think it's still taking time. But I have seen, kind of CIOs, CTOs, chief data officers, getting more hands on and understanding it. But it's usually focused on a business process that isn't their day to day work. And I'm like, it's both, right? Like you can use it yourself for your own, and it's an assistant, right? So imagine that the time that you invest in the assistant is going to come back to you. And I think that's where uh, sometimes you still get I'm in meetings all day. I don't have time, or show me. And sometimes you do that to show people what's possible with relative ease. And then they realize I can will these things into existence uh, just through understanding my intent very clearly and being able to articulate that. So I think that is something that's still uh, maybe one level removed. I think that end of the year will become uh, even more commonplace because you'll start to see it both at work and personally. I think with things like open call and that might be too far for some people, but having agents that can work on your behalf or some type of goal and achieving said goal, I think just people start to realize that that's a possibility, and uh, you can write your congressman a lot easier now than maybe and get through than you could have. I think from all the administrivia, from a bureaucracy standpoint, I think that's where you'll see a lot of, well, automation within the bureaucracy. You would hope, but how people interact with and get into the bureaucracy, that paperwork, those phone calls, that's something where I think AI is going to be a huge unlock. I think that's going to maybe surprise people. It will create more noise, but I
Yes.
think it will also create a good benefit because you have a delegated authority that you are enabling to operate on your behalf in some bounded context.
Yeah. Yeah. And your phrase, the talk about kind of people having that aha moment for themselves, I think is such a great prescient kind of realization, because I see it even in my leaders, right? They're not sure. And I push them a little bit, being the prickly co-founder CEO, right? I'm like, no, go try co-work. And then the next week, everything's a co-work skill, right? They can't brush their teeth without using co-work. And it tends to be just like this incredible momentum builder that once they cross that threshold of having really seen for themselves the power, it doesn't become work, it just becomes part of them. And I think so, I think you're right. Maybe it's going to take time to permeate the whole industry, but it feels very, very inevitable, a very significant penetration of this use.
And I think co-work is a fantastic tool, and I
Yeah.
think that uh, that has not made its way yet into kind of a lot of the larger corporate
Yeah.
enterprises. But I think that when they see that unlock, and is going to be a real game changer.
100%. I want to try and squeeze one more in because this conversation is just really rich. So, you're back at Cap now. After many years in one of the world's legendary insurers, um, and so you've seen both sides of partnerships, right? And I'm a huge believer. It doesn't really matter to me the configuration of partners, but I see that implementing technology at pace and scale, partnerships are a really key thing. They've been for us with our clients, they're for us with our SI partners. We were talking earlier about the rise of the FDE, and I'm sure we'll be talking HX and CAP about that more in due course. That being said, AI is one of these technologies that's driving, I think, an increased renewed build versus buy, in-house versus outsource conversation. Um, what do you think people should outsource, and what should they retain when they work with partners?
It's a great question. I mean, I think on the as a carrier, where would I still outsource? I think that there's a landing the plane. I think there's certainly going to be more insourcing and automation. So you want to have, I think, having continuity and having the knowledge agents there with you along the way is going to really help. But I think having a core group of people uh, that uh, that understand the workflows that you really want to be kind of your core. I think that part is important, but the other part is what we were talking about earlier. It was how do you go to an evergreen portfolio, kind of self healing, yeah, fast paced, good cycle time, people with kind of well rounded knowledge, with agents with well rounded knowledge. So you have to build that foundation is one thing, and the thing is speed matters, and you can AI can be either a strategic advantage or a strategic liability. So I think from a speed standpoint, that's where outsourcing can help. So the run side, which has predominantly been heavily outsourced, I think that that will decrease over time because there'll be more automation. But getting the legacy portfolio and kind of normalizing a lot of things that were kind of disparate through mergers and just never kind of integrated into your fabric. Now you can do things in kind of a nonlinear way. And to do that, I think you need partners that know the space, that understand how to use AI and kind of and apply that. Sometimes I use it like it's like clearing fields, right? If you bought a ton of land, you have all these ideas of what you want to do, but the fields have to be cleared. And could you could have three companies clear different sections of it, but the thing is that you want the speed of it being cleared because you want that end result. So the
Yeah.
faster they get there, the faster you get to this operating reality that uh, people couldn't have imagined prior to AI.
I love that. I
And that,
think what sorry, go on.
no, I was going to say, I think you outsource that, uh,
Yeah.
that the speed to work through that legaciness, and then at some point with AI, you have license and labor, right?
Yeah.
So the other thing is to go after license, and I think you'll start to see that.
Yeah.
And I think the important part for license is you want companies, I think, like HX that you can't keep up with HX. They are, you guys are moving so fast that it's not to your advantage to try to move that fast. But there are a lot of companies, name them, that are much more complacent. I think that those types of companies, I think the hyperscalers have already kind of went after tools to a certain extent. AI accelerant is an accelerant on that, but I think that's where you can outsource from security patching, uh, creating the agents that you want in your ecosystem, why do you care who created the agents? You just want the agent that, can perform so the faster that you have that done, the larger advantage you're going to have competitively.
I love that. What a powerful framework. I think, this concept of using the partners to accelerate, I think is such a great framework. I think a lot about that with us, right? It's like, actually, are there times outsourcing a problem is very rarely a good way to get anything done, whereas bringing someone in who actually has expertise and has the solution can accelerate things. And I think, that last point you said is absolutely true. It really motivates me, right, as a technology leader. I say to our team, it's like, if we can't move faster than our customers now, yeah, they have no need to stay with us. Right. And now they've all of a sudden got a turbocharger bolted to their engine. So we better be just bolted an even bigger turbocharger to our engine. Right. Because if we
It's the
don't,
same. It's the same for consulting
yeah,
as well. Is
yeah.
you have to be faster, adding more value than they feel like they could potentially manage on their own.
On their own. And I think that's a wonderful time to wrap up. Look, Kevin, you've been a friend and champion of us since, we were 18 people in a car park. We're super grateful for your partnership and really delighted to have you on the show. Excited to see where you take Capgemini next. Thanks for coming.
Likewise, thanks for having me, Amrit. Everyone.
That's it for this episode of the Underwriting Intelligence Podcast. I hope you found it useful and thought-provoking. If you did, don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you know someone in insurance who'd find this valuable, please share it with them. I'm Amrit, and I'll be back in 2 weeks with more insights that matter in the insurance world. Until then, thanks for listening.